And welcome to the premiere episode of the Boston Hockey Now podcast for the 2022-23 Boston Bruins season. And of course, joined by my teammate at Boston Hockey Now, Joe Haggerty here. I'm Jimmy Murphy. Joe, it was a more normal offseason, a little longer than we've had in the past couple years. So that was nice, but it still seemed to go by pretty fast. And here we are on the verge of another Boston Bruins season. Let's just get right into it. I mean, what are you feeling right now when you've been around the team a lot more than me at the practices and training camp? What's the general feel and gist that you've got in that dressing room?
It's what I'm going to be writing about in the season preview. That there's a feeling of one last run with this team, that this group is going to be very different after this year. There's a lot of uncertainty after the season. And that's why, it was normal as far as timeline for the offseason, but not normal as far as how the offseason went, right? They, fired their head coach. They had two of their most important players dangling up in the air, whether they were going to play or not, in Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. So there was a lot going on that was very uncertain and different about the entire thing. Going back to Bruce Cassidy thinking he was going to be back as the head coach, and then all of a sudden, a week, 10 days, 2 weeks later, he's out, and Don Sweeney has to go to his house and tell them that he's been fired after he thought he was going to be safe. That whole situation felt a bit dysfunctional. It really did, and I think anybody that's been around the team for a long time felt like things were kind of askew for a bit. And they calmed down when they hired the new coach, and people were pissed off about Bruce Cassidy being fired, people being Bruins fans, and Jim Montgomery coming in, and Don Sweeney and the mistakes that he's made and the choice he made to change head coaches, and all that stuff. But you get all beyond that, things kind of calmed down a little bit. We still had the uncertainty with Bergeron and Krejci as to what was going to happen with them. They come back on a one-year deal, so now they've got that in place. And then, beyond that, not a ton of changes besides Pavel Zacha coming on board. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this group gels together, how much better they can be when it's, a lot of the same players. Granted, you add David Krejci to that mix, and he's a big difference maker, I think, as a second-line center, especially with him motivated like Bergeron, where this may be the last year of their NHL careers. And I really think as we go on this year, that's going to be the theme for this season for the Boston Bruins, is let's make it a special year for Bergeron and Krejci and Pastrnak until he signs his deal. This could be the last year of him until he signs on the dotted line. I know all signs are pointing to him signing an extension, but, that's uncertain as well. So I think there's a natural sort of there's a natural development of things falling in a row where it's kind of like one last run. Let's make it a great year because we don't know what's going to be here beyond that. Cam Neely was saying at Media Day that, they still have Marchand signed. They have McAvoy signed to a long-term deal, Lindholm. There's all this stuff in place, so they're not going to completely fall on their face after this year if Bergeron and Krejci are gone. And that's kind of part of the selling point to Pastrnak, to committing for 8 years to Boston. But, I get the sense this is going to be a good year. I think they're going to be a playoff team. We'll see what happens when they get there, how healthy they are, how good they are. Maybe they have a run in them. But I really feel like this is the last time we're going to see this group together making a push for a cup. And there's going to be a bit of a reloading of the roster after this season.
Well, it's interesting. You bring up Pastrnak too, and I'm with you. Yeah, everything's pointing to him signing right now. It's obviously not going to happen before the season kicks off on Wednesday night, but I don't think it's any certainty that he's back. I still think that, as this season goes on, if he's not signed by, say, January, let's say by the Winter Classic, okay, and he's ripping the league up and he's got 30 goals already, or he's pushing 30 at that point, and, just really having a monster season. I mean, his agent's going to be an agent, Joe. I mean, we know what agents want. They want the biggest possible contract, and he's going to probably get in his ear and say, hey, man, you could break the bank if you keep this up. And I don't know if the Bruins are going to – they keep saying they're going to break the bank for him, but when push comes to shove and he's asking for, 10, 11 million a year for 8 years, which I think he's in his right to do, I don't know what could happen. So I think it's imperative for him to be signed by the Winter Classic if he's going to stay beyond this year. If not, I think all bets are off, and it's anybody's guess what happens. As for the team, you said there that not a lot of changes, but the one thing I look at right now, and we were just talking on before we started recording here, is that bottom six. And because of, not just because of skill and who's good enough to be in there or who should be in there, but as you said to me off the air, the paper maneuvering and the salary cap maneuvering and all that. And we already are seeing Don Sweeney having to juggle a lot right now. As we speak, as we record this, he's only $406,333 under the cap. Of course, it's expected that he's going to put Brad Marchand and Charlie McAvoy onto injured reserve. And by that point, if that happens, they will all of a sudden have $15.2 million in cap space, which is pretty nice. But what about those guys going on injury reserve? And what about the fact that on media day, both McAvoy and Marchand walked back their target dates a bit. They weren't, overly concerned, but they were also, I don't know if somebody got in their ear.
Well, I think there's a reason. I think there's a reason for that. I don't think it has anything to do with like things not going well with their injuries. I think it has to do with giving Don Sweeney the ability to make whatever moves he's going to have to make to clear salary cap space. If Marchand says, I'm going to be back by Thanksgiving, all that sudden that puts a gun to Sweeney's head that he needs to get a deal done by Thanksgiving. And I think that's why you're going to see them be vague about it. Marchand's going to return earlier than the timetable. Like that's just who he is. He's going to get back as soon as he can. I think McAvoy will probably do the same thing, but I think it's about, giving the Bruins whatever they need as far as vagaries when dealing with other teams where they don't feel their backs are up against the wall when they do have to make a move to clear salary cap space. But I don't even think that's really going to matter. Like, people around the league are going to know roughly when McAvoy and Marchand are coming back and know when Sweeney's back is against the wall. Nobody's going to do him any favors and, to make a trade to get salary cap space. I mean, it should be a reality to him now, a cold dose of reality. When Mike Riley clears through waivers, a guy they probably would love to trade for that salary cap space when everybody gets healthy. Guess what? Nobody wants him for free, Yeah. You're not going to be able to make a trade for him. You're going to have to give somebody else an asset to take his contract in order to do you the favor of clearing your salary cap space. And I think that's just the reality right now for Don Sweeney is that not only is he going to be forced to make a move, but he's going to have to probably give up a draft pick or a prospect in order to make that move when Marchand and McAvoy are ready to come back. So I think that's why they're being vague about that entire thing right now. I fully expect, Foligno, Wagner, and Riley down to Providence to, on a paper transaction. But I fully expect that they're going to have the group that they had with them the last few days when they take the ice against Washington. So, is it going to be a totally different fourth line? I mean, AJ Greer is definitely a new face too. That's going to add an element there. Yeah. And looks like he's going to be a pretty good energy player. But I still think, Trent Frederick, Thomas Nosek, Nick Foligno, those kind of guys are going to factor into the fourth line. I don't know how much different the fourth line is going to look unless Jack Studnicka really gets a long shot. Well, I think Jack Studnicka is going to be in there, and I also think Lauko could be in there. I mean, both Neely and Sweeney raved about him at media day. But getting back to McAvoy and Marchand, what I was going to say is, we're sitting here saying, okay, they're going for one last run. I know you're going to disagree with me, but look, if they're not at 18 wins, 17, 18 wins, which is usually the benchmark for where you need to be to make the playoffs by American Thanksgiving, then they're in trouble. They're in big trouble of making the playoffs because if you look at the Atlantic Division right now and how many teams have gotten better, and then you still have the likes of Tampa Bay and Toronto and Florida. Florida got better, many could argue as well. This is no sure bet for the Boston Bruins to make the playoffs. I think they're going to make it? Yes. But I don't think it's a lock. And I think that if they can't tread water for some reason, let's say a couple other guys get hurt between now and Thanksgiving, then you have to start wondering if this is a potential non-playoff team. I mean, we look at the teams where they've been over the years at Thanksgiving, and if you're not in the mix, if you're not saying that 5 to 7 point
under the plateau there, outside of the playoffs looking in, if you're past that 7-point mark there, so you're like 8, 9, 10 points and so on out of the playoffs, you usually don't make it. We've only seen a couple teams that have made that. I mean, I forget, there was one in the last 5 years, Joe. Who was it that made that crazy?
I think it's about like
who made that?
You've got about roughly an 80% chance to make the playoffs if you're, in a playoff spot by Thanksgiving. But look, let's be honest here. Let's throw away the talking points for the podcast and actually tell the truth. Do you think the Bruins are going to be more than 5 points out of a playoff spot at U.S. Thanksgiving? I don't.
I don't think so.
Even if they're missing Marchand and McAvoy, Pastrnak looks like he's primed for an absolute monster year. He's a free agent walk year. He's going to explode. He's probably going to score 50 goals this year. Patrice Bergeron may be playing the last year of his NHL career. He's going to be playing balls to the wall every single night. David Krejci is back in the NHL now after playing in the Czech, and he's excited to be back in the NHL. He really missed being in the best league in the world when he was back in Czech. And not only that, he gets to play with David Pastrnak every night, who he's wanted to play with for years. And Taylor Hall's in his happy place. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he'll get there with them too, I think, as things go on. I don't think Zacha's going to stay there. But, you put all these things together. You have goaltenders that are coming back and should both be better than they were last year, especially Swayman going through the entire NHL, that one full season. Yeah. Like, I know that's going to be a tougher competition in the Atlantic Division, but they're not going to be more than 5 points out of a playoff spot Thanksgiving.
Right,
no way. It's not going to happen.
I don't like that defense without McAvoy. I don't like the way it falls and where it goes without McAvoy. And I don't think, Grzelcyk looks like he's probably going to be able to go for the season opener. If not, he'll be in there Saturday against Arizona for the home opener. But still, Grzelcyk's, kind of the Tin Man. Let's be honest. I like him. I think he's a solid player, but he's kind of the Tin Man out there. And I think without McAvoy in there, a lot of guys are going to have to pick up way more minutes out there. And it's just, I don't like that defense right now as it currently stands.
I'd like it a lot worse.
McAvoy is that important to that.
I'd like it a lot worse if Lindholm wasn't there. I think with Lindholm there, it's going to be okay. Like, if he was not there, I would be very, very concerned about that defense. But he's a guy that's going to be able to play 25 plus minutes a night, play in all situations, play against the other team's best players. Like, he's going to be able to do all that stuff, move the puck. Like, they're going to miss McAvoy, no doubt. But I think when he comes back, let's say they're an average decor to average to slightly below average decor without him, right? Mm-hmm. They have the potential to be one of the best decors in the league when he comes back with Lindholm and McAvoy chewing up 25 to 30 minutes a night between the two of them. So, like, I just don't think the decor is that bad that they're going to, like, completely have the bottom drop out. Look, Ottawa's the flavor of the month. Detroit, to a degree, is a flavor of the month.
I'm not as high in Ottawa as
TVY has made a lot of moves with the Detroit Red Wings, and they've got some good young players. A lot of people are really high on the Ottawa Senators. That's fine. But, like, and even to some degree, people are a little more excited about Buffalo this year than they were before. But, like, look, with those teams, I'm going to have to see it before I believe it. Like, because it's been a few years now where people have been trying to ride those teams as on the come, and it just hasn't happened. So, we'll see what happens at U.S. Thanksgiving. But like I said, just given the way the training camp has played out, given the way some of these players have looked in practices when I've been watching, I don't think they're going to be more than 5 points out. And then when they get those two back, they're just going to start rolling.
We shall see. You bring up Ottawa there too, though, and I'm with you. Everyone's really high on them, and rightfully so. They should have been until this past week. All of a sudden, nobody's talking about this. Everyone's still raving about Ottawa. You don't have Cam Talbot for the first 7 weeks of the season. That's a big thing. Who do they have past Cam Talbot in net? Right? I mean, they got that kid.
They got Craig Anderson, don't they?
Or no, he's in Buffalo. He's in Buffalo. Right. They got that guy. He's like 6'7" or 6'8". He's a great prospect, but from everything I can't think of his name. He was in Binghamton last year. But anyhow, they're not solid after Cam Talbot. And Cam Talbot, let's look at it, for the past few years, has had a lot of injury issues. So even if he comes back, then he's still a risk to get hurt a lot. I'm not as sold on them as I are maybe on the Red Wings. And another team that I don't think people are talking about enough, and they were really, if you look at it, I want to say they're in the top 10 in points in the final 25 games of the season last year, was the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah.
And I think that's a team that I don't think they make the playoffs, but again, there's not as many free points as there used to be in the Atlantic Division. And that's why I think it's imperative on the Bruins. And I'm sure Jim Montgomery and his staff will have them ready to not overlook anyone, because let's face it, Joe, this team, even during their heyday, I'm going back all the way to the Cup year in 2013, and even during that year when they lost to St. Louis, it seems to always be a trait that the Bruins would play down to their opponents and sometimes look ahead. You can't do that. You just can't. You have to look at each one of these teams as a potential playoff contender. So we'll see what happens. But looking around the league, let's talk some Eastern Conference, Joe. We've looked at the Bruins. I mean, first of all, you say they're going to make the playoffs. Where do you see them finishing 1-8?
My prediction for this year is that the Leafs are going to take a hit. I think the Leafs are falling down the division. Honestly, I think the Leafs might be the team that is in danger of falling out of it, just given the goaltending situation, given the pressure that is on that team. Like, guys are going to get fired if they don't make the playoffs, or if they do make the playoffs and they're 1-out again. I think that's a team that I look at and circle and say that might be a team that really falls out of it and opens up a spot for one of these other teams. As far as 1-8, I still think Florida and Tampa are up at the top. I would put the Bruins below them, but I'd say 1 Florida, 2 Tampa, 3 Bruins, 4 Toronto, and then after that, I probably would put Ottawa next, even with the goaltending situation, because I do like their young core, and then Detroit, and then I'd put Buffalo 7, and then Montreal 8. I think Montreal's still going to be in for a tough year this year.
Yeah.
I know they made a lot of good moves, and, they're building the right way, but I think, you say there's no easy points in the Atlantic. There might be 2 easy points in the Atlantic for, at least the beginning portion of this year. Once their young guys really start going, maybe they're a strong team in the second half. But that's what I think. I think if there's one team to drop out of the top 4 that's been the top 4 for a while now and make room for one of those upstarts in the Atlantic Division, I think it's Toronto. I don't think it's Boston.
See, I'm going with Tampa Bay, just based on the amount of hockey that they've played in
They're goddamn good though, man. Unless they get killed with injuries, unless Hedman has a season-ending injury or something like that, I just don't see it.
Well, I just look at the amount of
and their goaltending's too good too. Vasilevsky's, the best goalie in the world. You're not gonna completely fall off the table when
let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. I think Tampa Bay, because of the alternate universe that we've all lived in for the past 3 years or 2.5 years, and the amount of hockey they played in the different odd times when you're not usually playing hockey in, and I mean the summer basically. It catches up to you. And I think the fact that they were able to make it as far as they did and force a Game 6 last year in the Stanley Cup final is just a credit to them and their willpower and their heart.
Yep.
Because they were going on injured legs, injured arms, out of breath. They were tired. You could tell. And they were they were pushing themselves through with pure will out there. And God bless them for doing it. But they're human. And all these guys are human. And sooner or later, I don't care how young or old you are, when you play that much hockey in a short amount of time, it catches up to you. So I'm going to say that that's the team that has the potential. I'm not saying they're falling out. I say they have the potential. As far as Toronto goes, I'm completely in disagreement with you, Joe. I think this is it for Toronto. They're finally going to push through. And I'll tell you why.
You like their goaltending, huh?
I love Samsonov. I think Samsonov is a good goalie. He was in a bad situation. He had a crummy defense in front of him in Washington.
Okay.
And I really think that
and he's got an all-star defense in front of him now in Toronto. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Defense than Washington, I'll tell you that.
No, they don't.
Yes,
that defense is terrible.
Oh, really?
It's
Okay. You want to go through the defenses in Washington, Toronto right now?
Buddy, I'm telling you right now, Toronto's been run and gun. Their defense has not been good for a long time. And it continues to be the weak spot on that team. They're soft and they play bad defense. That has been the 2 hallmarks. To say he's going to have a better defense in front of him in Toronto than Washington, I don't see it.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you another thing I think is going to happen in Toronto that's going to send them in the right direction and get them over the hump is I don't think Kyle Dubas or Sheldon Keefe are going to be there come Christmas. Right. I think they get fired before then, and then I think a new coach comes in and they go balls to the wall for the rest of the year, and I think they take the Atlantic Division. I got Toronto, I got Florida, Boston, and then I'm kind of flip-flopping between Detroit and Toronto in that 4 slot. We'll see. But that's where I'm going right now. As for the other divisions, I look at the Metro division, Joe. I think that is a crazy wide open division too. I mean, a lot of people are going to say Pittsburgh is – they're going to draw the parallels to the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Boston Bruins being in the same situation, one last run. You know, they got all their veterans back. I think that is a good parallel, but I'm not sold on them. I'm not sold on Tristan Jarry. I'm not sold on their defense at all. So I think it's wide open there. I think the team to beat in that division is the New York Rangers. And I really like what they've done. I like some of the smaller guys they brought in, some of the under the radar signings. I think the Devils might rise up the rankings a bit in the Metro division. I don't know if they make the playoffs, but I think that's a team that if they can stay healthy, if Jack Hughes is healthy, I think they look good. They got Vanacek in net there, who could be he's better than Blackwood was. I'll tell you that. So that's an interesting team to watch there. The Flyers, I think, are going to suck. The Islanders are kind of a crapshoot. That's another team who they're very slow, but they're tough. They're more built for the end of the year in the playoffs. So if they can tread water and get to that point, they kind of have that team when the game kind of switches and it's not as run and gun and clutching and grabbing comes back. They're that type of team. So I think it's wide open in the Metro as well.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I like Carolina. I continue to like them.
That's a favorite for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's one of these years they're going to break through and you know, I think get to at least get to a Stanley Cup final. And this may be that year.
What about the Blue Jackets? What do we think of them?
I mean, they're fine. I think they're bubble playoff team. I don't see them as putting the fear of God into any of those other teams in the Metro division.
Are they putting Line and Goudreau on the same line? Do we know that yet?
No, but that's fine. They're going to score their goals. They're going to win their games. But I just don't know. I don't know they have enough good players up and down the roster.
Yeah, there's no depth.
If it comes to shove to really, make some noise in the playoffs. But that division, I think, is in a time of change because Washington one of these years is going to fall off.
I think this is the year. I think they fall out.
And Pittsburgh is going to too. I don't know if this is the year that happens. I still think they've got enough pride, to be able to get into the playoffs and maybe even win a round. But they're on their way. They're a very parallel team to the Bruins, where they're at the end of their run with their current group of players. They may be able to prolong it for another year or two, but hard times are coming for them.
Hey, you know what? I know Don Sweeney's got a lot of heat over the summer here, and he's been getting a lot of bashing going on. Of course, we saw Cam Neely come to the defense of him on media day saying, stop talking about 2015. But one thing Don Sweeney should get credit for, you're talking about the parallel between Pittsburgh and Boston. They're kind of in the same spot, one last run, right?
Yeah.
Except Don Sweeney doesn't sign Patrice Bergeron or David Krejci or both to insane long-term deals like Ron Hextall did with Malkin and Letang. What are you thinking giving that deal to Chris Letang at that age? I mean, come on. That's just asinine, man. He's still going to be playing on that deal when he's 42. That's crazy. So give Don Sweeney credit that, he wants to go for one last run, but he kept the future in his head and he's still thinking about it. What's life going to be like after these guys? I'm not going to lock myself into some more long-term contracts with guys that are likely, borderline end of their career. So I was just shocked at that. I don't know how Ron Hextall still has a job, to be honest. I thought that Chris Letang contract was insane. So I think the Bruins are in a better spot in that regard in a few years when they don't have to worry about any contracts like that, and they can start to filter in young guys or hit the free agent market or the trade market or what have you. So we'll see.
It won't be next year when they're paying off the penalties for the 1 year incentive-laden deals.
That's a good point.
Bergeron and David Krejci this year. So
they're
also going to be paying the piper next year. So
next year for sure, but not 4 years from now. No. Looking out west, Joe. Obviously Colorado's still the team to beat. I honestly think they could repeat, which would be interesting, right? If we had back-to-back repeat champs, right? We had Tampa 2 years straight, and then if we got Colorado 2 years straight, I don't know if that's ever been done. But I think they're the team to beat out there. I think a lot of people are going to talk about Calgary because they're so revamped in the offseason they had. But I think a team to look at right now, if they can stay healthy, if they can get things together, would be, you're going to probably disagree with me, Bruce Cassidy's Golden Knights. The only thing I worry about is Logan Thompson. But you look at that roster, Joe, that roster on paper should have made the playoffs last year. If you're talking about who has the most skill and just talent and all that, we're just talking on paper and not what happens on the ice. That's still a very good roster on paper. So if they can convert that onto the ice, I think they have a very good chance to make it back to the playoffs and make a run. I don't think they win the cup. I think they're definitely back in the playoffs, and they could push deep into the playoffs if all goes well. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and make a deal for a goalie during the season. We'll see.
Well, I was going to say, who's their goalie? That's really the question I would be asking about that team. And if you have questions about who your goalie is, that usually portends trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's a simple cliche for hockey, but it's true. Like if you don't have a clear-cut goalie or you don't have some clear-cut answers between the pipes, you're going to be in for
the Colorado Avalanche didn't have a clear-cut goalie for most of the season last year.
No, but they had guys that actually played well. And they had guys that you looked at and said they've played, they've been a number one guy in other places in the league, or they've. No, I'm talking about the other guys they had when they started the year. You know what I mean? They had some candidates there. That's the thing. Who is going to be the guy that's stepping into Robin Leonard's shoes that's really going to take over there? That's when you start losing 5-6 games in a row and you can't pull out a win and you kind of spiral when you don't have goalies that can come up and make plays for you. That's the one thing that, really destroys morale in a locker room more than anything else. If the team is good and then they look at their goalie and say, it doesn't matter how well we play, we're still going to be losing games because they're giving up soft goals and they can't bail us out when, we make mistakes. So, between some of the injuries that they've had and some of the way things ended there was very weird for me. Like the makeup of that dressing room, it seemed like there was, weird stuff coming out of there. Like, I don't know if everybody was on the same page. And
I think it's more from ownership. I think that the players are very upset with ownership there.
Because they keep moving on to new players,
character guys out of there, like
Nate Smith, shiny new toys all the time.
Exactly.
Between that and the dynamic between Jack Eichel and Bruce Cassidy, if Bruce Cassidy was very hard on players in Boston, and we know Jack Eichel is kind of a fiery guy. It's going to be interesting to see how the two of them mix.
Yeah, they're either going to be really good together or really bad. There's no in between with that. Good talking about goaltending. I think if we look at one team that everybody's talking about, making a run and getting over the top, I don't necessarily think Jack Campbell is the goalie to get the Edmonton Oilers over the top. I really don't.
No, but I think he's better than Mike Smith.
I agree with you there.
Mike Smith is an absolute roller coaster ride. He always has been. I mean, I remember when he was playing for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he seemed more focused on playing the puck than he did actually stopping the puck. And Seidenberg pretended, skated over the red line, pretended he was going to dump it in the corner. Mike Smith went flying out of the net to go to the corner to get the puck, and Seidenberg banged it into the open net. He does stuff like that all the time. He's a great athlete, and hats off to him for still playing in the NHL. As an older veteran, but that guy was always going to be Jekyll and Hyde goalie, hit or miss in a big way. That is not who, if I had a loaded team like the Oilers do, that is not the guy I'd want between the pipes that everything was resting on, that is very inconsistent and makes a ton of bad mistakes. Even if he's
I'm with you. So if I'm going to put you right on the spot before we close it out here. Give me your cup final.
I think Edmonton. I would say they're gonna. I think they're gonna do it. And I think, look, conspiracy theorist, whatever. The league had to see last year how much noise they were getting in the playoffs because McDavid was just going nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's in the NHL's best interest that their superstar, their face of the league, their best player gets into a Stanley Cup final sooner rather than later. So, there was a lot of things aligning.
It's in Edmonton's best interest, too.
Well, it is. It's in everybody's best interest. Honestly, you want, in the NHL, you want your best player, your most electric player to be in your, biggest platform event and your most important event. And I think we're trending towards that. Whether it's this year or next year, I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see Edmonton in the Stanley Cup final. Because I think also McDavid is figuring out in the playoffs like what he needs to do to be successful, and he's starting to get it. The way that Wayne Gretzky did at one point, the way that Mario Lemieux did at one point with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think he's starting to understand what he needs to do to win. And John Tortorella got killed for saying that about, I think it was even last year, about McDavid. And kind of the lack of playoff success he had and how he had to kind of change his game. And I think he did to a degree. Like he also made the playoff change for him, right? Like he kind of mixed what he does and made the playoffs open up a little bit for him. But I think he also played a harder game in a lot of ways to adapt to the playoffs. So, and as we see more of that, I think we're just going to see he's an unstoppable force. And if they even get average goaltending with the team in front of them, I think they'll be okay. In the East, I don't know.
1990 rematch?
I'll give it to the Florida Panthers. Why not?
Okay. I'm not going to go for a Bruins-Oilers 1990 rematch.
No, I don't think. No, the Bruins
with Peter Kleemer and Glenn Wesley dropping the ceremonial pucks.
Look, I'd love to be sitting next to you in the Garden or out in Edmonton covering a Stanley Cup final between the Oilers and the Bruins, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. I don't know if this one last run is going to run all the way into deep June. I'm not sure. I'm gonna go with the Avalanche in the West again. I think the Avs really. I think Sakic will pull off some deal too to make them even better. I like them, and I'm gonna go with the Rangers in the East. And I think
that's a good pick.
I think the Cup comes back to Broadway next June. I think the Rangers take it all. So the Rangers over the Avs in the final is my pick. So we shall see, my friend. And maybe we can cruise down to MSG and take in a game if we don't get to see it here.
Maybe.
Why not? Why not? Well, Joe, I know you're a busy man and you're headed off to DC. Enjoy the season opener there, my friend. And I will see you around the rink soon.
Sounds good, Murph. Take it easy, bud.
All right. That's Joe Haggerty. I'm Jimmy Murphy. This has been the first episode of the Boston Hockey Now podcast. We'll talk to you next week. Game on.